I'm so happy to be able and so privileged to be able to invite my own drag mother to be with me in that setting. And I want to give you a little small description about her. Jennifer Hopelezz, she's 38, I'm 36, is the drag queen mother of the House of Hopelezz, with more than 50 children and countless relatives. She's not only a mom, but also a business person, activist, columnist, and sports fanatic, originally from Sydney, Australia, where she completed her degree in medicine. Jennifer moved to Amsterdam for the liberal and free-spirited atmosphere of this beautiful city in the 1990s. She's 38. Although the core business of a drag queen is entertainment, Jennifer believes that drag performers should use the attention they get to play a role in the civic conversation. As such, Jennifer is particularly interested in issues of gender, homophobia and transphobia, gay nightlife, sexual positivity and visibility, HIV and AIDS, and personal freedom. Okay, mother, come in. Hi, how are you?
Oh, thank you so much for the wonderful introduction, Taka. Thank you, and thank you for inviting me today.
It's really my pleasure. And because it's my pleasure, I thought to sum up a little bit your past and go to topics that it's really your interest, so it becomes your pleasure.
Yes.
Shall we do this?
Yes, of course, yeah.
So, also your CV said that, your bio said that you grew up and you studied medicine in 1980s in Australia.
Yeah,
right?
That's right. Yeah, I'm a doctor. You can call me Dr. Hopelezz.
Now, you see, my mother is a doctor. And as well, your parents are immigrants from Greece, right?
That's right. Yeah, they're from Greece, just like you.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I'm kind of third generation Greek, Australian.
And around 90s, you arrive in Amsterdam.
Yeah.
And you also found your husband, I think, in a dark room, right?
That's right. We met in a dark room in the Reguliedwaasstraat way back in 1991.
Also, for me, like before I enter club church and we start doing what we do till today, I knew you, but I didn't know you. I knew Pink Point, which is, I mean, the sound now a little bit, gay and lesbian information center. You know, Pink Point is like front of Homo Monument next to Anne Frank's house, right?
Yeah, we set that up in 1998, a gay lesbian information point, it was called back then. And it's still there today, supplying information on the Homo Monument and general information about queer Amsterdam.
And you are actually throwing parties, sex-positive parties, before the club from 1995?
Yeah, a little bit later, we started organizing events on the Homo Monument. And to raise money for that, in our foundation, we started to organize sex parties on the Warmoestraat in bars. That was then the gay leather street. So we've been actually organizing sex parties for more than 20 years, yeah.
Okay, interesting. So let's say, based on this experience, let's go to a topic that you know very, very well, and you have it very close to your heart and to your activism. And that's prep activism, right?
Yeah.
Let's start from there, and maybe later a little bit, we can go also a little bit to drag mothering and what our house stands for and how that is being influenced from you. But tell me all about it. Tell me a little bit about the prep. So the floor is yours, and let's see. Yeah.
So, so as you said, we started organizing sex parties, and that was the height of the AIDS epidemic. And so they were all safe sex parties. And that was sort of influenced by AIDS. People were doing safe sex parties, very strict condoms. And in those days, people would check, go around with flashlights and actually check. And I always felt very safe visiting those parties because you knew it was going to be safe. That's my sort of background. And also in Australia, where I come from, as you said, that it was always very strict about having condoms and lube in every venue that had every sex on premise venue. So when we started our own club, Club Church, in 2008, that was for us very important to have condoms and lube freely available. And we signed agreements with the health department in Amsterdam, and we were actually the only club or bar in the whole city that actually stuck to that agreement. And before Corona, we were giving away like 1,000 condoms a week in the club. So that was kind of our role. I always feel that, your sex, your health is your responsibility, But I also think the government has a responsibility, and the owner of these sex venues has a responsibility, and to our community. So that's where we come from. And of course, then PrEP arrived on the scene in about 2015. So, yeah, and that, you know, I'd first heard about PrEP around 2015, and it had been available for a few years in America.
I'm sorry to interrupt you, Mama. Let's say a lot of viewers, that they see us, they're also students, or they might know what PrEP stands for, or what exactly is.
Yeah.
Can you give us a short description?
So PrEP is a drug that you take that prevents you getting HIV. So it's a preventative drug, prophylactic, and that was available, as I said, I think from 2012 in America. We heard about it a few years later, in 2015, and it wasn't available in Europe as it wasn't registered as a prophylactic. And meanwhile, you know, running a fetish sex club, you'd see people running risks, and it became very personal. I have one of my best friends who seroconverted, got HIV just before PrEP came in. So you saw that, you know, customers, staff, friends, people were running risks because HIV became less threatening around that time, but it still wasn't available in Europe or in Holland. So I joined the action group PrEP New, and we really pushed the government, we really lobbied, and we promoted the use of PrEP. And actually now Holland has got one of the highest awareness rates of PrEP within Europe, and that's all done by the activist group PrEP New. The government really didn't raise a finger. So I think we can be really proud of the work of this community group and in raising awareness and getting the use of it. Anyhow, the story gets a little bit more complicated.
How?
So the drug wasn't available here, and there was another group called the Prep Shop Boys, and they were actually importing it from Asia.
Around 2016 again, right?
This is around 2016, so it wasn't available here. You know, we're seeing a lot of guys getting HIV unnecessarily. So this group called the Prep Shop Boys had arranged with a very socially active gay doctor in Thailand, in Bangkok, who ran a STI clinic there. And he was actually writing scripts for PrEP. He was checking, I mean, this is the world upside down, but he was checking Dutch patients. He was checking that they did all the right tests, the kidney tests, HIV tests. He was writing a script, and then providing, the Prep Shop Boys were helping to provide the drugs. So there were people flying literally from Thailand to Holland to bring in these drugs. And so it's kind of, was to me a bit of a flashback to the beginning of the AIDS epidemic, when people, like in that film, The Dallas Buyers Club, people would, you know, going, you know, taking the law into their own hands in a way, but for a good cause, because the government was so slow and people were dying. So I think it's, and in this case, people were getting infected with HIV totally unnecessarily. And so, yeah, the Prep Shop Boys were bringing in drugs. So they had, I mean, we also brought back for personal use, my husband and I, from Thailand, 1,000 pills, so 30 you were allowed to bring back 30 bottles for personal use, of course. But there were like literally KLM stewards bringing stuff back. There was a pilot from an airline, which I won't mention, who was brought in 90 bottles, you know, so people were smuggling in the drug for Holland to save Dutch guys from, you know, Dutch people from getting infected. It was crazy.
I remember as well around 2016, maybe it was, the argument was a little bit, you know, but condom is there, condom exists. Why you want another medicine? You got condom, right? What's your position on this?
You know, when I first heard about PrEP, I was also, is it really necessary? But very quickly I realized, you know, take your moralism out of the thing, and this drug, I mean, is a way to end the AIDS epidemic. Because we've been using condoms and education for all these years, and still there were consistently 1,000 new cases of HIV in Holland every year. And now, since we have PrEP, a couple of years, it's dropped to 500. And this, together with condoms, you know, you can hope everyone uses condoms, but the reality is that they won't use them all the time, even though gay men use condoms much more than straight people do. And so, yeah, this was a vital way to end the AIDS epidemic. And and I thought, so we had to bring it in. I mean, you saw the HIV rates dropping all over the world, places where it was brought in. So it was vital, and indeed, and now in Holland you see that as well.
And how is it with PrEP today, like in 2020? What is the status, let's say?
Well, you know, our lovely right-wing government, who just got voted back in again, has still not made it really easy. You can get it from the health department, the local health departments, but there's limits to how many people can get it. And there's still a lot of moralism. So if you're a guy living out in the middle of nowhere in Holland, and you're trying to access PrEP and your doctor doesn't agree with you, you're in trouble. People still find it hard to get to. The price has dropped, 20 euros for a bottle, but it's still, you know, on top of all the other costs involved, it is out of reach for a lot of people. So it's still frustrating, you know, the right-wing government, you know, we've been talking about ending the AIDS epidemic for 35 years, and then finally we have the opportunity to end the AIDS epidemic, and the government really doesn't lift a finger. So that's what inspires me to be active, to be an activist.
I mean, you are also not exactly activist, you're doing so many different projects, you're a bit hyper-activist. But to go back to your point a little bit, it's also interesting to see, like, with ending, or the concept of ending the AIDS epidemic, how that's going to stand now, or 2 years later, that we're in the middle of another pandemic, right, with Corona, and how that can actually disassociate, because maybe because not for everybody doesn't mean that's still relevant, right?
Yeah. I mean, especially for our community, it's relevant. I think more than 30 million people have died from HIV, and I think, you know, don't want to compare, but with Corona, I think it's like 2 million deaths worldwide. It's you know, been around for 35 years, and our community has been really heavily affected, of course. And in the West, it's sort of coming to an end, but of course in Africa, many places not. So yeah, it's very, fighting two pandemics at once. So it's important not to forget the AIDS epidemic.
It's also interesting because I remember in 2018, right, that we collaborated first time with Global AIDS Village in Station Rai, that we received this email from this organization that they say, hey, we're searching for activists, dractivists in the city, and we came across your drag mother, Jennifer Hopelezz. And that was because of PrEP, basically. They have seen what you were doing, they could follow it, and it was really going quite well with our agenda, and we did what we did with the house. We did the sex-positive shows and etc. But for me, it was a very interesting period to see how you are using. I learned so much that year from 2013 that I'm like next to you. How you are using attention, like what that stands for. I think it was very interesting to see that from 2016, because you had also another project going on with the taxi, or another point that the taxi discrimination or what was happening to you, because you're doing way too many projects, you know, from Drag Olympics to initiate Super Bowl, the European drag battle for drag houses, But for me, the interesting with her is how she's using this, and her age, because she's wise, she's 38, how she's using that in order to take attention and actually say certain things, right? How you relate to that?
Look, I always think, like as we said, I'm from Australia, and I think there's a history there of drag queens using their role to collect money for charity, especially AIDS charities. And when I came to Holland, I didn't see that a lot. My husband, Elad, who set up the Love Dance, was one of the organizers of Love Dance, collecting money for the AIDS funds, and that was back in the beginning of the 2003. And that I saw was a perfect opportunity for us drag queens to get involved and go around collecting money. So we set up a group called the Begging Babes, and we used that to collect money for AIDS funds. And at the same time, you know, it takes a lot of the sting away from drag. Not everyone loves drag, believe it or not. But when they know you're doing it for a good cause, that can, you know, take a lot away. Oh, people are like, oh, okay, that's why you're dressed like an idiot. You're raising money for, you know, something. And it creates a sense of community amongst the drag queens that we're doing something good, and, you know, we're all in this together. So for those reasons, we set up Begging Babes, and we still collect money every year for AIDS. And actually, funnily enough, in France, they were inspired by us. There's a group called Dragation, and set up by Enzo Fragola.
Yeah, right?
Yeah, and they're collecting money in Paris and other cities in France based on our Begging Babe. So it's very
And I think they're
exciting.
collecting more.
Yeah, they make more money than we do.
But I just want to make a little disclaimer here because let's say it sounds weird, but what is a drag house?
It's a drag house, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that idea of drag houses, actually, I think, well, the first time I heard about it was from that very famous film, that Paris is Burning, from the 1980s, the ballroom scene in New York. And there you saw houses with the drag mother, of course, who sets up the house. And we brought that idea to Holland. We set up, I think, really the first drag house of Holland, the House of Hopelezz. That was actually with Axel Rod, who was my assistant for when I ran for the position of Nightmare. She ran my program. So we set up a drag house. The whole idea about, drag can be scary, as you say, trying to get a taxi and getting discriminated against, but also, makeup and hair and tips and stuff like that. So it's great to have a drag house there that will support each other and, give tips on hair, makeup, what to do, but also to perform together and, strengthen groups, of course. And a mother really brings her personality over to the house. Yeah.
But that's kind of an interesting point here, because I think Hopelezz, from I remember we're discussing, I think not long ago, that Hopelezz, for your idea when it became a house, was for the Begging Babes. It was basically for that collective event that you start seeing, okay, wait a minute, here we can be like 10, 20 people, right?
Yeah. I always liked doing drag in groups. So we used to go to the Hartjesdag, which was a festival in Holland, in Amsterdam once a year, and with a group, and the group grew every year, and it's always fun to do it with other people. And I love trying to literally drag people into dragging up for the first time, because I think a lot of people are very curious to see how they are playing with their gender as the opposite gender. So we always had a group around us, and that it was just fun, and it's great to, you do create a real community around drag, and friendships and everything that involved about drag, and you see now, even with the corona pandemic, that the houses are often clinging together and organizing in wonderful events like this. So, that there's real strength in it, and there's a real, fantastic thing about drag houses.
And you say that in your idea, that the mother brings the personality. But let's make a distinction here. What personality is in drag, right? I mean, you don't talk about that. I mean, we're in the same house. We're in your house. And we look, maybe I got a little bit bigger, but we look distinctively different, right? You don't talk personality. What do you mean with personality?
Well, the drag, because we started drag before RuPaul Drag Race, so I think in some ways it's freer then. I think a lot of drag queen, or people who want to start drag now, think you have to do this, you have to tuck, you have to do all these rules. But for me, drag is about really breaking rules. And so with my house, I always let people be free. And I think you just see this huge diversity. And, we've had drag kings and drag queens, and we've had drag horses and dogs and, and everything. And I think that let people work out their own creativity. So I think our family's about being, crazy and do your own shit,
Yeah, and I think it's actually what you really, really taught me, and I really appreciate that every person can be its own character, right? Its own completeness. And what you have to do, as a mother, is to actually support that. I remember once that very clearly, I'm not gonna tell her name, but I came back to you after a Super Bowl event, and I told you, this girl, she's not cool, she's a little bitch, and this and that. And you told me, but Taka, how do you know that she's like a bitch? Do you give to her love for a year? If you do that, she might soften up. Right? You remember her?
I think so, yeah.
But so that I think for me it was very important, that acceptance and curiosity, right?
Yeah. And it's taught me out of my drag actually to be a lot softer and to be more accepting. And funnily enough, you do become a mother, or whatever that means to you, and people treat you like, when I'm not in drag, I have a lot of people come up and call me mummy. It's pretty weird, but it does things to you, having this extra character and a softer part. So I've learned from my drag character, and it's brought me a lot of places I wouldn't have been.
I mean, it's exactly what you said. It actually makes you softer. Or sometimes, you know, you are not in a good mood and it's like the day after an event and they steal your queue in the supermarket and you're like, yeah, but if I was with my character, I'm going to like, yeah, pass. Pass. You can go. You know, so sometimes I channel, I'm like, like, when I'm like Panayotis, I think like, what Taka could do here, you know? Because I think we carry responsibility even like, if I have to come this morning, right, in that event here, and a kid saw me with their mother in the street, I think we're carrying the responsibility to be very, very sweet, because a lot of people sometimes they're a bit afraid or intimidated, as you said. So
of course. Drag queens are, you know, are traditionally known to be bitchy, and I always thought there's enough bitchy drag queens in this world, so let's be sweet. And that actually works, because, like you said, you can be intimidating with the heels and the hair and everything. So it's disarming for people when you're sweet and open.
And let's say, okay, we are open, you are open, but to be also very, very honest, I mean, as a house, we do have very specific aesthetics in terms of camp, punk, queercore, sex-positive message. We are open, but actually we like when things are a little bit tilted for the mainstream, right, and all of that. So I have a question to you. It was very clear. First time that I met you, November 2013, I came to your house after a performance for a coffee. And you told me with such an easiness that for you combining drag and politics is fun. And I like that, you know, like usually when you talk about politics, you don't talk about fun. So it's like, so can we go a little bit, because we have some minutes more, can we go a little bit back to the idea of Dractivism? And what is so funny to you about doing that? Yeah, let's go for this.
Well, I mean, drag queens are nearly always, or drag performers, on a stage. And so when I always thought if you combine drag with anything other than stage performance, then it gets attention. Like we organized the Drag Queen Olympics way back in 2003. That got a lot of attention because you got drags throwing handbags and looking like idiots. And then later on, when I decided to run for mayor, the night mayor, as we call it, mayor of the evening, I noticed that, you get a lot of attention when you combine drag with politics. It's a double-edged sword because people don't necessarily take you seriously. They don't literally see through the makeup, but you do get the attention. And my drag mother, Fabiola, was actually very famous for going to demonstrations, and wherever she would always drag up, and she would, of course, get the photos. She would get the attention. She'd get the camera or the microphone put in her mouth. So that, to me, was by dragging up, you get the attention. If I didn't do drag, I wouldn't be here today, literally. So it gets you a lot of places you wouldn't get to otherwise.
And so for you, and let's conclude somewhere here, this attention, it comes basically to try to bring a sex-positive message to a society, also in areas you consider more gay-friendly, rather sex-positive, right?
Yeah, that's true. I think I think the whole world's got more conservative in terms of sexuality.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I think so, in Holland as well. So indeed, it's not. I think it's important. Sex positivity is a strong part of my personality, and I think that's important for drag queens because a lot of drags also are a bit scared to add sexuality to their character. But of course, I think that's really important. But a lot of issues involving the queer community are important to me. Drug use, and of course, as we talk about HIV and discrimination. So but running a sex venue, of course, then of course, being sex positive is important. And I've seen the city get more conservative, and so that's something I really fight against.
It's also something interesting here, like our drag, your drag, or my drag in club church has to pass through the darkroom, right? The backstage is here, and the darkroom is here, and upstairs is the dance floor. But I think that actually really influences what we are about, or which people stay with us, right?
Yeah. Like you said, you literally have to walk through the darkroom to get to the backstage area. And indeed, I mean, all the drag queens connected to Club Church, to the House of Hopelezz, we're performing in a sex venue. So that filters out quite a lot of drag queens. And that's something about Club Church and our drag scene, that everything comes from this freedom of sexuality, and so that affects the club. This sort of freedom that you don't get in a lot of venues, I think. And you can walk around naked if you want. You can have sex, even like in a regular night, like the Thursday nights. And I think that gives people a real sense of freedom, and I think that's what I'm standing for.
Perfect. And I think somewhere here we can conclude with a small anecdote. I'm never going to forget in my life the experience. It was last year that Jennifer was in Greece, and somehow I could not go in Greece. And what you see that I'm wearing is really needed by my mother, the mother that gave the actual birth to me, you know?
Your biological mother.
My biological mother, yeah, that one. So it was a very interesting thing was going on that Jennifer was in Greece, and she went to my house in a village to pick up the costumes of my mother. So my drag mother went to my biological mother to pick up my costumes. And that day, you remember how excited I was? I was like, maybe I'm doing something very right in my life, or I'm doing something very wrong, or these two people that are doing something to me, and I'm just the actor of it. So I have to thank you, and I have to say that I really love you, and you know that.
Yeah.
And I'm really happy for, and very blessed and privileged that I have met you. And I think I'm going to know you till you're 39, because I think you're taking 1 year every 10 years or something. It's very
like
interesting.
dog years or something.
So I would invite John Wonderful Bart to lift up from the chair. And these chairs that you see here on the table, they're made from Anna Rensede and Carla van der Beek, two fine art students, which I think they killed it, and they bring the streets into the museum.